and welcome back to yet another exciting week of the Lazy Money Game. In this week's episode, I'm going to share an update on my portfolio, meaning sharing my latest purchase, and finally I'm going to answer a rather practical question from one of my viewers, namely, how do I actually trade a stock on the broker Nordnet, which I'm using? So let's start with a portfolio update. So as always, the first thing we notice for this week's episode is that there's a green circle, meaning that the portfolio is up in value compared to last week. If you go to the portfolio overview tab, then you can see that the portfolio has increased with $7,700, but at the same time the cost has gone up as well. So the actual increase has been a little more than $200 in value. So despite the fact that there has been a lot of volatility within this week, meaning that my portfolio took a big hit in the beginning of the week, then it has actually recovered quite nicely and we ended the week on a positive note. Another thing which really stands out for me as a positive thing is that for the first time ever, I have now surpassed the $150,000 mark. I mean, of course, I have invested a lot to achieve that value of the portfolio. And I mean, as a Dane, there is this point around $164,000 because in local currency, meaning Danish kroner, that will be around $1 million. And I mean, hitting 7 digits of value for your portfolio, that is a huge achievement because everyone knows the first million is the hardest. So that is an obvious next milestone to work for. And I mean, whether or not I'm going to hit that milestone within this year really depends on how the market develops. Because if we see a drop off as we saw in March last year, well, despite the fact that I'm trying to put in as much cash as I possibly can into the portfolio, well, then I wouldn't be able to hit it within this year. But if the market develops as it has done over the last 6 months, then I feel pretty confident that I will hit $164 in value for the portfolio before the end of this year. And if we then continue to my favorites tab, namely the dividends tab, then we can see that I have received a little more than $40 in dividends within this week, and they came from General Dynamics. And as you can see, I'm now well above $200 within this month, meaning that I am well on track to beat my previous record of $405 within a single month. And at the same time, we can see that the estimated yearly income has increased with more than $200 compared to last week. So if we go to the overview tab, then it is due to the fact that Beatrice has announced a quarterly dividend of 11 cents per share, giving me $132 in extra annual income. And at the same time, I have added an additional company into my portfolio, namely Nexstar Media Group, which pays 70 cents per share, giving me $140 in annual income before withholding tax, which gives it a dividend yield of just slightly below 1.9%. So this is obviously way below the 3% which I have in my guidelines. So why do I even consider buying a stock like Nexstar Media Group? Well, the first thing I do when I'm researching for stocks is, first of all, I need to understand what the company is doing, and if I don't understand what they're doing, I simply stay away. Once I think that I can understand what they are doing, then I try to investigate, do I think that this company have a competitive advantage? And then I start to look at what price is this stock actually trading at. And if I believe that I can buy the stock at a reasonable discount or with a margin of safety, then I'm willing to add it into my portfolio. So let's take a closer look at Nexstar Media Group and see how it fits with my guidelines. So if we go to Nexstar Media Group's webpage, we can see here that they own, operate, program or provide sales and other services to 198 television stations in 116 markets, or approximately 62% of all US television households, including 120 local websites and 284 local news and weather mobile apps. And you can actually see all the markets at which they are operating on this map. Or if you prefer it as a list, it is actually just right below. Here you have all the 197 markets at which they are operating. I will of course include a link in the description below for this webpage, so you can go and take a closer look yourself. I will of course also recommend that you go and take a closer look at the annual report. I will leave a link in the description below for that as well. I'm not going to go through it in this episode. I will just look into some of the numbers as we go along with my guidelines. So let's take a closer look at the guidelines. I have brought them to the screen now so you can recap them. As I have mentioned, I definitely fail on the first one since I don't have a yield above 3%. This is not something that I'm too concerned about, since I believe that this is a company where the possibility to grow the yield above 3% over time is definitely present. So let's take a closer look at guideline number 2, meaning a dividend yield forward above the 4-year historical average. So if we go to Seeking Alpha and look up Nexstar Media Group and take a look at the dividend yield, then we can see that the 4-year historical average has been a little higher than what I am currently seeing, since I'm seeing 1.89 and the 4-year historical average is 1.91. So I'm a little below that, indicating that this is not an optimal time to buy, at least if you consider the last 4 years of history. If we then look to guideline number 3, that the PE ratio should be in line with its peers. So if we then go to the peers tab on Seeking Alpha and go all the way down here, then we can see that the PE gap forward ratio for Nexstar Media Group is well in line with its competitors. And what is really appealing to me here is if we scroll down a little further and look at the revenue growth over the last 3 years and over the last 5 years, we can see that Nexstar Media Group definitely places itself within the top of this bunch, with a revenue growth over the last 5 years of 36%. They are above all of its competitors. So if we should take a look at guideline number 4, meaning a dividend payout ratio below 75%, and at the same time look at guideline number 6, a good dividend history, well, if we scroll down, then we can see that the payout ratio is well below 75%, since it is below 17%. But what is much more impressive to me here is that the 5-year growth rate of the dividend is really close to 24%. So since the payout ratio is currently quite low, there is a lot of room to grow this dividend if Nexstar Media Group decides to do so, if they can keep up with the growth rates at which they are currently seeing. Of course, the past is no prediction of the future, but this is at least really appealing. And if you look to guideline number 6, then they have a good dividend growth history, since they have been growing the dividends for the last 8 years. So if we then look to guideline number 5, diversity across sectors, well, if we look at the portfolio pie chart here, we can see that healthcare, financial services and real estates make up the biggest part of this pie. So adding Nexstar Media Group, which belongs into the communication service sector, really fits well within this portfolio, at least from a diversifying perspective. If we then continue to guideline number 7, a strong company potential and a good moat. If we then go to Macrotrends and look at the revenue and the operating margin for this company, I mean, look at this development over the last 10 years. This is more or less one steady increase. This is really what you would like to see as an investor. So what are some of the downsides to this investment? Well, let's start by addressing the elephant in the room, since if you take a look at the liabilities, they have more than $10 billion in debt. And they have a credit rating below investment grade, indicating that there is more risk with this investment. And if you look at the stock chart here over the last 5 years, I mean, currently they are trading above $150, and a year ago you could buy them down to almost $50, meaning that they have tripled in value since then. So why am I still willing to invest in this company when they have all this debt, and that I could have bought the stock for a third of the price less than a year ago? Well, I believe that the fair price of this stock would be around a PE ratio of 15, meaning around $225. And the debt does not worry me that much, since they have a lot of cash flow generation, and that the payout ratio for the dividend is only 17%. That means that they can actually pay down a lot of the debt over the coming years, if I believe that they can continue to grow at around the pace which we are currently seeing. So that is my thesis. So in this case, I believe that the risk is worth the reward that I can potentially see in this company, and that is why I have chosen to invest in it. So if we go back to the portfolio overview here, then you can see that it is 50 shares that I have added, and I paid $7,413, which is a little less than 5% of the entire portfolio. If we then turn to questions from the audience, then I have received a rather practical question about how you actually execute an order on Nordnet. So if you want to search for a stock, you log into Nordnet, then you go to the search field here to the right, and once you have entered something into the search field, you will start to see a menu. So if we just use the latest example, which I have just purchased, meaning Nexstar Media Group, you can either enter the ticker code NXST, or you can enter the name of the corporation, and then it will show up in the search field. So once you have selected the stock, then you will be presented with a screen like this, where you can either buy or sell. In this case, I have a holding of 50 shares. Then I have to select an order type. I simply just use the one called Enkel. You enter the amount of shares and at which price, and how long you want your order to be valid for, meaning today or 2 weeks from now or up to a month from now. Once you have confirmed your order, then you can go to the top right hand of the screen under orders, and in here you can see your order, and you have the possibility to cancel it if it has not yet been executed on the exchange, meaning that it has been filled. Once the order has been executed, it will show up under your transaction history within a day. So that actually sums it up for yet another exciting week of the Lazy Money Game. So now you at least know more about Nexstar Media Group and why I have chosen to invest in it. And if you were wondering how you could search for a stock and do a trade on Nordnet, you have also seen how to do that. So if you like content like this, then please consider leaving a like, subscribing to the channel, or leaving a comment. It really helps me out a lot. And if you have any other questions, then don't hesitate to leave it in the comment below or send me an email. And until I see you next Sunday, bye!